We are live.
Only.
And now I gotta remember our intro. Yeah. Wait. Tweet. We are live. Okay. I have tweeted. Or twitted or whatever.
Yep.
And I have the chat open in case anybody joins us. So we are good to go. So with that, welcome everybody to our August science fiction, fantasy, short fiction live show. That's a real mouthful. That we are supposed to do every month, and it's usually every 4 to 6 weeks. And it's very unpredictable right now because life has been busy and we haven't been reading short stories like we were supposed to. But this month, Joe and I are going to be discussing a collection, and I'm going to let Joe introduce himself as always.
Hi, I'm Joe. My channel is Vulnerable Joe. I'm from Kuwait. I read large amounts of science fiction, reasonable amount of fantasy, and random other things here and there.
Right.
And then talk about them.
And I am Rachel, and my channel is Colonati, and you're on my channel, so you know that already. And I read science fiction, fantasy, short stories, and a little bit of other things as well. And this month, we are going to be talking about the 8 stories in Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted Chiang. This is his one and only story collection, collecting his first stories. This was published originally in 2002, and it was recently re-released in new editions by major publishers, almost certainly because a major movie is being made out of the title story, which will be coming out in November of 2016. So everybody is noticing Ted Chiang's collection right now, and we read it, and we're going to talk about it.
Yep.
So my edition is by Vintage. It looks like this, and I also have the original small beer press version, which isn't nearly as pretty, but nostalgia. And what's yours look like?
Mine's this one, which is the Picador edition.
Yeah, I really like that one.
I don't know. I like your the one that's sort of words that make the face one.
Yeah, the nice thing about this is it has like the clock on the front of it, which is I think a nice commentary on time in the title story.
Important to most of
It took me a while to get that reference, then I figured it out. So question is, should we talk about the stories in the order in the collection, or should we jump to the ones that we enjoyed the most or that we have the most to talk about?
That's difficult to say. Yeah, probably should have decided this before the live show.
Well, you know, we're just
as you know,
flying by the seat of our pants this month.
She's fine. How many are there? There's 8.
Mm-hmm.
What about if we start with the merely okay one?
The merely okay one. Do we agree about which ones we really didn't care for? We get those out of the way first.
Well, I'm pretty sure that we've got pretty similar opinions on which ones were not special.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in then and say, let's talk about the evolution of human science first. It's the shortest thing in the collection,
Yep.
and it is just a little blip. I have little to say about it, honestly. This is, I'm looking at the notes here because I forget exactly what it was written for. It's almost like a flash fiction piece. It was written for the British science journal Nature, and it is it's basically a mock piece that you would find in a scientific journal about a scientific journal, and it is human science versus meta-human science, I think.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. Um, I think it's supposed to be about a humans arguing whether their science research is still valuable or whether analyzing meta-human research is valuable, because regular humans literally can't understand it, and they're just trying to reverse engineer what meta-humans are doing.
Yeah, as best they can.
Yeah, I find the idea of this one to be interesting also because I think that maybe a metahuman wrote it instead of a human. But other
Yeah,
than that, it was so short,
yeah, it's difficult to talk about because it's like 10 pages or something.
if
Or
that. Let's see.
in mine, 6 pages.
1, 2, 3. Mine is 4 pages. It's
Oh,
all of
okay.
4 pages. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it has a lot of cool nuggets in it. I mean, just the fact that metahumans exist, that they were created by humans, and then so you could choose to make your future children metahumans, but then as their parents, you wouldn't be able to relate to them at all.
No, the surpass you and be on a different level.
Yeah. Which I think is like a realistic reaction.
Oh yeah, definitely.
um, but other than that, I have little to say about it. It's an interesting like thought piece. I can see why it was published the way it was. Like that's exactly the kind of flash fiction piece that a science magazine would publish, I guess. But meh.
Yeah, it's just something. It's like a little interlude in between other stories, really, almost.
Yeah, yeah,
Although in a way, it's kind of appropriate for the moment, considering the whole meta-human thing. You think about DC Comics, what they're doing with their movies and things at the moment. You know, all the DC stuff at the moment is to do with meta-humans. You know, Justice League and all these big new movies they're bringing out in the next year or two. It's all meta-humans. I thought it's oddly timed, really, in that way.
yeah, yeah.
And it was written quite a few years ago, so but I think, if I remember correctly.
I think it's interesting that the term metahuman is used rather than posthuman. Um, I'm not exactly sure what the difference between the terms is, but I hear the term posthuman used in science fiction now, like Ramez Nam's Nexus trilogy or whatever is about posthumanism and people becoming posthuman and the difficulties of that. Um, but I don't know what the difference is between that and metahuman. But
Yeah, I mean, Hamilton, P.F. Hamilton uses sort of post-human ideas in his books, and the idea that I always get from those things is that meta-humans are still human; they're just super fast, and in terms of sheer speed, but also mental. Post-humans, I think, traditionally way more than human. They're not even physical anymore. Often they become energy or some um, sort
yeah,
of mass consciousness or some sort of higher plane of some kind.
that's true. Yeah. makes me think about the story differently then. So there's that one. And the other one that I myself don't have much to say about is liking what you see. It's the final story. And it's about, like, in really simple terms, inducing face blindness, but not exactly. Like, you can recognize people's faces, but you can't tell that they're beautiful. It makes people blind to human beauty, especially in the face. And the story, that it's a documentary of a college where students are voting on whether all of the student body will be required to induce this caliagnosia, or however you pronounce it, if they're going to be a student or not. And why you would want to do that. And my problem with this story is the way that it's told. I don't know if you also have the same problem with that it's in that documentary format.
Yeah, it didn't feel together. It felt all like in little pieces, and it didn't flow well for me. Just sort of, you've got one character, and you've got something else, and then it might be several more sections, of the sort of filming before you actually see that character again and what is happening.
Yeah.
And then by that point, you already think your concentration is already focused on another character because of the block-like quality.
And I wonder, like, if this story was turned into a movie, I don't think it would be super compelling, but I wonder if the format would work better, if it's something about it being in text rather than as a visual medium.
It probably would, obviously. Then you could have, obviously the camera crew would be you.
Mm-hmm. I also feel that the way some of the people talk, it works in text, but it's not the way somebody would actually talk if they were being interviewed. Like the girl who kind of wants to get together with her ex-boyfriend and is trying to decide whether to turn on or off her Callie, and the way that she talks about her relationship and the decisions she's making, like, you wouldn't actually say that stuff out loud to an interviewer or in public.
No, you really wouldn't.
She's like talking about these doubts about, like, trying to get her boyfriend back, and it's like, no.
Yeah, so I mean, especially as, I mean, obviously the personalities aren't fleshed out, but you certainly don't get the sense that she's that kind of, open about everything. She's more of a private person anyway. You get the sense of, so her being then overly willing to show on camera is a bit like, it doesn't quite work together.
Mm-hmm. So other than the format, the point of the story itself and what it's talking about, what do we think the story is really about?
Well, just ignoring whether it's the natural force onto ignoring sort of physical appearance and basing somebody on who they are and the personality and intelligence, rather than going by somebody's visual appearance, if they look particularly nice looking or not. And whether, if you could change that, obviously make it not an issue, then would it be a problem anymore?
Mm-hmm. I feel like the thing that people are arguing about in the story is not always whether it's a good thing or not to see or not to see physical beauty and to judge people based on that, but whether essentially ignoring the problem makes it go away.
Yeah.
If everybody in the world, or everybody at a single place, like at this college, if everybody couldn't see beauty like this, then it could have a benefit. What they're saying is not everybody in the world does this. So you may be like personally happier because you can't see beauty in other people, and you're viewing them and judging them based on their personality or their intelligence rather than being swayed by their physical beauty. But you don't know if somebody else is treating you in a certain way because of your appearance. You're ignoring the problem, which means something could be happening to you and you don't even realize it.
Yeah. I forced ignorance is bliss.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much.
But it's really, that's my thing is, I don't think it really works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're addressing the symptom, not the cause.
Yeah. And that's why I think that in some ways the story feels kind of superficial. It's it is literally about things that are only skin deep, and you have very young and impressionable people talking about it. And yeah, no.
Well, like, in that sense, I suppose it makes sense though, because them being the whole story feeling skin deep, the problem is about a skin deep problem.
Mhm. The one thing I do like though is that the boyfriend who's referenced in the story, where he basically tells his ex-girlfriend, I think at one point, that growing up with Callie not being concerned with people's physical appearances made I think it made him feel more adjusted and happier with himself, so that he just wasn't worried about it later in life. And aside about whether this is about a superficial problem or a beauty problem, it's an interesting thing to think about for anything with kids when you were like raised a certain way with or without something, and whether that gives you a confidence boost later in life, perhaps. I don't know if I expressed that at all correctly, but
Yeah, I know what you mean. I don't know. It's. I mean, overall, I mean, it's an interesting story. It's just a layout. It's just not. It's not ideal layout for it. If it's just done differently, the the points could have been made better, whatever better is as such. But
mhm.
I don't know.
I believe that this is the story that Ted Chiang declined a major award nomination for because he himself didn't think it had come together in quite the way that he had imagined it to be. So if it is the story, I do believe it is the story, and that tells me something about it didn't achieve the effect he was going for, and I think it's in the structure.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you were happy with it, then
Yeah. So those are the two duds for me.
pretty much. I mean, I was thinking exactly the same too.
Of what?
I was thinking of the same too as well. So
Okay.
we agree on them.
Or should we just skip to the big one then? Story of your life.
Yep.
It is my absolute favorite one in this collection, and I think it's one that people are going to be really interested in. So, do you want to describe what it's about?
Look, consider how much do you like it. It's your favourite story.
Is it kind of a complicated story to describe, especially if I want to avoid spoiling it? Because I don't want to spoil people for the movie that's coming out either. I'm not sure how the movie's going to handle this, but it kind of has two things going on at the same
Yeah.
time, and they cover the same time period in a way, which is why there are two narratives going on. So the main thing that happens is that our main character is a woman. She's basically a professor of linguistics. And when aliens show up on Earth, she is recruited, along with many other linguists in the world, to meet the aliens and figure out their language and communicate with them. And there are some concerns about what the aliens' intentions are, whether we want to teach them our language. So everyone's worried about war with aliens.
Yep.
But it's not about that. But as she learns the aliens' language and then their system of writing and their spoken language and their written language are like completely different. The way that they write language kind of rewrites her brain and how she perceives, I don't want to say like the structure of the universe, but how things are. Like fundamentally, the way that she sees like cause and effect in the universe changes.
Different.
The other narrative in the story is her speaking to her child in second person, in you, describing points in her child's life. And it skips around in time. The story where she's talking about working with the aliens' language is past tense and in chronological order, but the other one just jumps around. And I don't believe it's a spoiler at all to tell you that when the story starts, you know the child is already dead.
Yep.
So literally the entire story encompasses her child's life, and knowing why it does, like what brings these two things together and why it has to do with her child, is, I will leave it up to other people to discover, but I think it is amazing.
Yeah, I mean the structure is interesting, and you know the way it's got to. I mean, I'm really curious how the film's going to manage it though. It's going to go the sort of alien communication one, and then the flashback one. Are they just going to include? Are they just going to have them in flashbacks and in the same order? Because in a film, it could be. Well, I mean, there's been more peculiar films that frankly, but it'll certainly be unusual if they do it in the jumping away, in the jumping around order that the book is in.
Mm-hmm. I think the reason the structure works well in written format is, I think, just because it's written and rather than visual. And as you read along, you can figure out for yourself why it's doing that. And it all has to do with time,
Yeah.
the past, present, and the future. So I also have the added benefit, this is the second time I've read the story, and I think that on the second reading, the time elements and it's not exactly circular, but it's clearer when you start out the second time where it's going. So
Yeah, because to me, also I didn't have that, so I was curious as to where it'd end up. Because finding out that her daughter was dead at the start of the book, after that story, it's like, okay, now how exactly is it going to continue from here? You talk about deficit, so it's a bit grim. So I was a bit
I
curious
don't
as to
think it talks
how
about death, but it's not really about death. It's about life and death, and
everything in between.
yeah.
Okay.
So I find the story to be very emotional. I think that what's going on in the book is really emotional. I think it says a lot about love. And I wish I could talk about why. I just really don't want to spoil people.
Yeah,
But the last couple of pages where like some of these callbacks are being made, and there's like that one quote in the book. I want to find it actually. So there are two places in the story where she says, this is about her daughter. Yes, that's her. She's mine. And it's just a matter of punctuation, really, and the difference between how she says that. In the second time, when you know the other time she said it, it just, I started crying like a baby. I was just bawling.
Yeah, I mean, it is a powerful story. I mean, be yes, probably say the most. All the other stories are more thoughtful in that regard. Yeah, they make you think this is the one that makes you actually think, but with your emotions first.
That's an interesting point. When you compare this story to others in the collection, like Tower of Babylon, or even what is it, Seeing What You Like or anything, they feel like big idea stories where there's this core concept in the story that's being explored. But in this one, it feels like there are a lot of red herrings. Like there are these things that pop up in the story, and you think, oh, this is about language, or it's about time, or about aliens.
Yeah,
And it's actually the story of a family. That's what it is.
yeah. The stages of a family over life in an
Mm-hmm. Which makes
unusual
it,
manner.
it's very subtle. It's kind of understated. And I think it's way more about emotions and how these family events feel like than any of the other stories.
You could, I mean, all the others are exploring very particular concepts in normally in a more sort of extremely sort of intellectual way. This is investigating relationships and people
Mm-hmm.
really almost entirely. And then obviously the very things they make you keep thinking, hang on, this is going to be like one of the others, where it starts focusing this, and then it's like, actually, no, it's not. It's something else entirely, and then it does it again, and it just keeps slightly making you sort of reevaluate what you're actually reading as you're reading it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
We'll have to, when this is out, we'll have to watch it on the same over the same weekend or something. We'll have to try and plan that, and then we can talk about it. It should be pretty interesting, actually.
if nothing else, what I've been hearing about the movie makes it sound like divorced from the original story, it's still a really good movie. So I will try to go into it with an open mind.
Yeah. Well, obviously for me, you're more invested in it, obviously because you've read this before and it's got more of a connection. For me, I've only read it once and obviously so recently, so it will be interesting to me, but not obviously the connection won't be there in the same way.
Yeah.
To be honest, I'll be thinking most of the way through the film, I'm thinking, I wonder what the actual things of this bit, pretty much. But I know that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then trying to remember anything, I'll be trying to remember certain parts, as we actually talk about it.
Yeah. So let's talk about a story that you really liked. You pick the next one.
Ooh. Hang on, there is. Oh, I've got a few of them. I mean, well, one that's the opposite of stories of your life is Understand, which is the second story. For this, it's a guy who finds out a way of enhancing his intelligence through. Well, I won't go into any. It's not that. It's not the best. Not about the method anyway. and then he realizes that he's not the only one that's had this enhancement done to him, that his intelligence is rising. There's possibly somebody else, but he's not sure. And his intelligence is like really astronomically high. I mean, I say intelligence, it's kind of above intelligence at this point. His way of thinking, because he's not able to think faster, but he's able to evaluate even his own thought processes as he's thinking them. And it's just talking about why would it will be a disadvantaged intelligence be good, and is it a good thing? And I just love stories that talk about this. I really do. It's I think you mentioned it, and it got me thinking about flowers vouch. It's
Yes.
kind of a perverse idea of that in a way. He's becoming smarter and smarter, but for a different reason. He's perfectly okay to start with, and he's becoming smarter in a really unusual way, more so than flowers vouch. It's like, is he becoming smarter because he needs to become smarter? And also asking, is intelligence a goal in itself, or should there be a further goal? Do you should you wish intelligence for a greater purpose, or do you just want to be intelligent for the sake of being intelligent?
Yeah, what is your ultimate goal for using your intelligence? Very personal, or to change the world, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I do think it's really interesting to compare the storyline of this with Flowers for Algernon, because there are some key differences, even though it's so similar in some cases. Like you say, it's this feels like a really exaggerated kind of perverse version of Flowers for Algernon. But some of the differences are that the main character, what happens to him is almost accidental, but then he becomes in control of his own enhancement.
Yeah.
And maybe in a not very good way.
Yeah.
But both of the stories have like this crescendo where like extreme intelligence is achieved, and then they both have a crash, but the crash is so different.
Yeah. I mean, this is more of a, obviously, Flower is an emotional journey of intelligence. This is a purely an intellectual, got like a thought exercise of intelligence. What we could achieve with it. Obviously, Flower is asking whether we should in the first place. The consequences.
Mm-hmm.
And
Is the story so chilling and kind of disturbing in some ways because it doesn't have the emotions and relationships that Flowers for Algernon has?
yeah, because this is almost like clinical intelligence. This is him having it happen to him, and then realizing that he can enhance him, he can analyze and sort of focus his own intelligence growth. Yeah. Obviously, in Fazal, Charlie doesn't have that. He's, he's mental state before, obviously, and he sort of undergoes the procedure because he wants to be, like everyone else. And then people are abusing him, but then other people want to try and help him, and it's really quite unusual.
Yeah.
Um,
When I think of the story, I think this is definitely something that you like. It's absolutely your kind of story. So
well, yeah, it just that kind of analysing what intelligence be, and it just to me like the story just works for me.
yes, I don't have much more to say about that one other than like how intelligent can people actually become? Is there a ceiling to literally how much the human brain can handle when you understand how you understand? Like, is that even possible? It's really mind bendy,
Yeah.
and like, why would you really want to do that to yourself? But anyway,
Um, hmm. Another um, interesting one that I know we both liked was Division by Zero.
yes.
This was, I thought this was quite an interesting one. This was sort of halfway between some of the other more sort of abstract intellectual one and stories of your life, you know, sort of half thoughtful, half emotional.
Mm-hmm. It's another one where there are kind of two stories happening at the same time because it's a husband and a wife, and the wife has had a mathematical breakthrough that undermines her, I guess, belief in how the universe works, how math actually works. And then the
Yeah.
husband is having, I guess, a breakdown of his marriage because of empathy or sympathy or confusing the two.
Yeah,
Um,
he can't connect with her because he doesn't understand it. I mean, not to the
yeah.
same level. He's so he's not sure what to do.
My difficulty with this story is that I completely understand what's going on with the wife, what she discovers and how she reacts to it. I understand that. I understand in some way why she would feel that way. I mean, she attempts to commit suicide when she makes this breakthrough. It is so traumatic and depressing to her. And I strangely really get this, but I don't understand what is going on with the husband. Especially because at the beginning of the story, it seems like he is doing everything he is supposed to do. He I think maybe the problem in this, what the story is about, is he mistakenly thinks that because he himself tried to commit suicide when he was younger, that he understands what his wife is going through. He's comparing two things, two experiences that are actually not the same at all. So he thinks he's acting with empathy, and he's not, because empathy means he has to try to like actually understand what's going on, and he doesn't get it.
You know, he's
If that
kind
makes
of
sense.
he's generalizing the idea of their suicide. He's he tried it years ago. She's more recently tried it, and he's thinking, well, suicide is suicide regardless of the reason. Almost.
Mm-hmm.
So you can just talk to her, and they should be able to just find out why, and hopefully, you know, things should be able to be fixed, and they should hopefully be happier than they were.
Yeah, I don't know. I find this story really depressing actually, because just the way that it ends, and realizing that they're kind of at an impasse, I guess. He can't help her, and she doesn't seem to understand what his problem is either. And then it's over.
Yeah,
Like, what happened after the final page? I assume they got divorced or something.
yeah. I mean, it's a bit too brief at the end. But I mean that was my main problem with it. I like writing everything else. It just cut off so quick at the end. It's like, okay, it's ended. You wanted something. I mean, not anything too much more, but just something slight, at least hinting more of a resolution. You know, you didn't even have to tell you what this. It left it so open. It could be any number of things happened.
Or
although
somebody that
most of them probably
there
agree.
isn't a resolution. I mean, if that's part of what the story is, that there literally is no resolution to what's going on here.
No, just well, but in that way, yeah, it's true because things just end, not things aren't resolved; they just finish happening.
Yeah, I like
Um,
it. I mean, I really enjoyed this story, even though it kind of disturbs me at an emotional level. I guess I just feel kind of like off balance, like at the end of it, like, whoa, that was just not right. But yeah.
what other stories are there? There are, well, the two major ones would be 72 Letters or Hell is the Absence of God.
Oh, let's tackle Hell as the Absence of God. This is like the best title in the collection.
Yeah, I mean, it's noticeable in the at the start, you know, all the other titles got sort of fairly normal titles, and this is quite a sort of dramatic statement for a title.
Mm. This is another one that I really enjoy this collection. I think almost every single story in it is really strong. But this one, the way it's written, it is very, it is extremely straightforward. It's telling you in absolutely no uncertain terms what is happening and making those major statements, like literally just very factually about the nature of God and heaven and hell and faith in the story. Because in the story, these things are fact. You couldn't talk about real religion and real belief in our world outside of a book in this manner without like really pissing people off.
Oh yeah, just
And I think that's why it's challenging to read. I mean, I think that both of us are not very religious,
hindsight.
and I would like to know what somebody with more faith thinks about this story. Like, how would you react to it? Um, because I kind of just take it literally and factually, and even then, parts of it like kind of ping my radar and go like, "Oh, that is just no,
Yeah,
oh."
don't go, you know, don't talk about that or leave that in that way.
Yeah.
Debatable.
So, what the story is about, for people who haven't read it, is it's set in a version of our world where God is real. Everybody knows God is real. Angels regularly come to Earth and have visitations, and angelic visitations are basically natural disasters. They're like a hurricane hitting you, or people go blind and they die, and some people are saved, but it's like it's pretty a horrific event. Um, and you always know who goes to heaven and who goes to hell. And sometimes you can actually see people walking around below you in hell and everything. So belief is kind of a thing. Everybody knows these things exist. And are you a real believer in God's love? Are you going to go to heaven? Are you going to go to hell? It's kind of a vital question for many people.
Yeah.
But interestingly, the main character is not a very religious person. He's never really thought about faith. And when his wife dies in an angelic visitation, she has a pretty horrible death. There's nothing good about it. She goes to heaven, and this man hates God just suddenly because of what happened to his wife, but he wants to love God so that he will go to heaven and be reunited with his wife. And it's about what he does to come to love God. And there are some revelations about the actual nature of God and his intentions in the story that just ooh.
Yeah. I mean, it's some very awkward questions, some very significant questions, I think, like about how, I mean, what is the importance of religion in our world, and also how far should we take it, and can we take it,
Mm-hmm.
and why? Because
And I'm going on a limb here because, like I said, I'm not really religious. I don't understand how to really talk about this kind of thing. But the question of what is real faith? What can you call belief? What can you call faith? Can you force yourself to have faith? Is that really faith? I have no idea.
I don't know. It's an interesting one.
But that's part of why I would love to know what some people think. Like, if you like practice your religion and you study the Bible and you know way more about these things than we do. Like, what do you think about this story and what it's saying? And
Yeah.
I feel like there's probably something in this that I'm completely missing. The way that he has twisted things or like completely reversed some things. Like, I've always grown up being told God is merciful, God has a plan, God loves each person individually. And this story is saying the exact opposite thing, which is so challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting one, really. I don't know, I mean, from my personal background is sort of have the experience of religion, and my parents are, they're not atheists, they're not, I'm not even sure what I class myself as. I'm not atheist, they're not exactly agnostic. If you want to be religious, believe in that, you can. I don't, but I don't disbelieve as well. I don't know, I've never been entirely sure what I am, though, in that regard. So, um, this, this did make me think. I mean, that's why I did quite like this one, because I've really asked quite a few interesting questions about what religion is, what we think it is, and why is it important to so many people.
Mm-hmm. So I would definitely pick this one as the most controversial story in the collection, from the title to the very end of it.
Yeah.
And here's a question. Is it a science fiction story or is it a fantasy story?
Oh, that's challenging. Well, it's not science fiction, I don't think. It's not exactly fun. It's close to science. It's close to fantasy, but not exactly.
Is this
It's
a case of taking a theme or a topic that is usually considered to be fantasy or is often turned into magic and treating it in a scientific way instead? Is that what makes it science fiction?
yeah. Although I think it's one of those stories, but I think it might depend on your own belief and what you already think. Kind of, it can be either, it can be almost any genre, depending on how you think before you read it and what it makes you think of. I think it's a nice one, actually, that way.
I guess you could put it in like a middle ground and call it literary speculative fiction. So you don't have to call it sci-fi or fantasy. Just say it is very literary in some respects and it's speculative. So
Yeah.
yeah, which I think is something actually that Ted Chiang does a lot. I usually consider his stories to be science fiction because the core concept or theme in most is really quite scientific or technological. For example, he has an entire story, it's not in this collection, but it's the truth of fact, the truth of feeling, and it's about the technology of writing, I think. And you have to actually know before you go into the story that the pencil is technology, that writing implements are technology. Otherwise, it isn't quite so obviously a science fiction story. So it's very subtle, and he's always doing that. So I like to argue about the genre sometimes.
And this one was the one that made you question what it is that you're reading.
Mm-hmm. The other one, I think you could kind of like segue from Hell is the Absence of God to Tower of Babylon, because they're both stories that reference God and do something interesting with the structure of the world. And I really like Tower of Babylon. Like I find Hell is the Absence of God to be kind of disturbing and really makes you think, but Tower of Babylon is almost like a comfort read to me. I like the way it's written. I like the sequence of events, and the ending, like what they call it, the denouement or whatever, is just spot on.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the one story that's got more of a, I mean, it's an actual story. It's got a solid plot. The others are more sort of parts. Yeah, they're not. This one's, you know, it's actually got characters who do things, you know, from the start and then go to a finish.
Mm-hmm. You're
Go to
right.
a finish that made
It has very definite characters, and it's a definite chronologically told story, with the beginning, a middle, and the end.
And you've got the environment as well, which obviously, you know, the whole tower, and then walking round and round the steps of this ginormous, apparently endless tower. Yeah, you're not. That you may, that may or may not be.
Yeah.
I mean, that is obviously, yeah, traditional storytelling.
Oh, hang on a second. I want to check the chat. I just saw something there.
Hi, Brock. Science fiction, but if you just say science fiction to help categorize it in a more narrow way, we use the word for convention.
Yeah, I don't really think that science fiction is like a subgenre of fantasy, but I want to argue about genre right now, so.
Yeah,
I
that
tend
would
to think
be.
I tend to think of science fiction and fantasy both being under the umbrella of speculative fiction, which probably means they have similar roots.
Yeah, they're just different ways of. They're just greatly different ways of looking at something. They can both deal with the same problem. Well, concern. Different ways.
So, getting back to Tower of Babylon, sorry for the interruption. Tower of Babylon it's like set in biblical times, in the ancient time of like building the Tower of Babel from the Bible. I call this like biblical science fiction or Babylonian science fiction. And they're literally building the Tower of Babylon up to the vault of heaven, which they can actually like touch. They want to tunnel through it and see what's on the other side, and like discover what God has made on the other side, basically.
Yeah.
And I like how literally this treats the universe, that you could actually build a tower with mud bricks high enough to reach the sky, and the sky is an actual physical solid thing, and you can cut through it like rock. And the description of the methods they use for like cutting stairs, and like doors and stuff through the vault of heaven, and having to prepare in case they hit a reservoir of water and everything.
Just so practical.
it's so practical and it's fantastic. And then what they actually find on the other side and that end.
Yeah.
And this is why I think the story is really has a science aspect to it or a technological aspect to it. And it makes me actually ask whether this is supposed to be set in our past, in like actual ancient times, or if it is like on a space station or on an artificial planet or something.
Yeah. I'm always well just thinking of the shape of the board and trying to work out how would a straight tower go from the top to the bottom and but still with the bottom. I can't say too much about that though, because I don't want to give things away.
I don't know. I think that the world isn't that like physically it's not like that, but I think like the fabric of the universe or space itself is twisty in some way. I think that's what it's actually saying. But the first time I read it, I thought it was being very literal. I thought it was some sort of weird cylinder and it was like super like an Arthur C. Clarke book or like Larry Niven's Ringworld or something. And on reading it the second time around, I don't think that so much anymore, but maybe there's some influence there though.
Yeah, I mean, I did think of both, Clark and Niven Ringwald when I was reading it, because obviously the way it goes up, but your back we started, not exactly. But you're never entirely told whether you are or not either, which obviously is what both of them do. You know, they let you debate it, but they don't entirely tell you the answer, which is
I wonder,
curious.
yeah. So this is probably like a theoretical physics thing, but I read Parallel Universes by Brian Greene earlier this year, and that's the book where he describes like 9 different theories for multiple universes. And I'm not going to remember this correctly, but one of the things he talks about is these various shapes, like the shape that a universe can have. It has something to do with string theory, and they can be very bizarre shapes. And that's what I think of when I think of this story, that their universe is a really weird shape.
Yeah, I mean, his inspiration for writing these must have been extremely varied. So I wouldn't be surprised if it was, this one could have been sort of partially scientific, based on, advanced theories.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it'd make perfect sense.
So actually, I wonder if the order of the stories in this is a particular way. Um, the order of the stories in the collection is in the order they were published. So Tower of Babylon was his first published story.
I didn't actually hadn't realised that they're in that order.
This story is 26 years old.
Okay. Oh, of course, yeah. George.
Yeah, it was published in 1990. Sometimes I forget how old some of these stories are. It's like it doesn't feel like it was that long ago they should have been published, but yeah. So the only other story we haven't talked about is 72 Letters, and we're about the hour mark. So we want to go through this one quickly.
Kind of. 32 letters is one about, well, it's linguistics, right? It's basically, there's a factory that makes golems,
Mm-hmm.
and then the golems inside it then make themselves, well, make other golems. And the golems work by 72, it's 72 letters, described in a particular way.
Yeah.
Basically, it's like mystical computer code essentially, and the one guy thinks that actually, if you put a particular sequence in a golem, then the golem would then be able to write their own code and create. You'd actually have a race. Is that life then? And well, I don't want to talk about anything about what happens.
I'm fine about talking about the end of the story. Actually, it's the particular appeal of the story for me is that it's a story that starts out about the creation of golems, but it goes in a completely different direction from what you might expect. I think one of the two stories that I think of that have golems in them, just off the top of my head, are The Golem and the Genie by Helen Wecker, which I didn't finish the book, and then The Golem in Terry Pratchett's Discworld.
Just think of that, Peter Clay.
But in this story, Golem are not actual characters, which is something that I like.
No.
I have this particular hatred of like scientists creating androids, robots, golem, or whatever, and turning them into sexy young women or turning them into sentient beings and all those questions. Like that that's been done a lot. But this one is the story is about the 72 letters and what those do, what you can do with those.
Yeah.
And it's what's the term? So I'm going to talk about genetics. I recently read The Gene by Siddhartha Mukherjee, and it kind of covers both of the concepts that the story has. It starts out with the concept, this really ancient idea that, which was once believed, like really believed, that we reproduced because inside of us we have tiny little versions of ourselves. And so you have a really, really small version, and when you have a child, it's just that thing getting bigger and bigger. So every person has like that little homunculi or whatever inside of them. And that's how you reproduce. It's just like an endless sequence of this has something inside of it, and it has something inside of it, on and on and on. And how many generations could you have nested inside of each person? So that's where the story begins. And then it ends with a really clever reference to the creation of DNA, of the gene, and how do you take 72 letters and encode all of the possible characteristics of a human being into a single sequence, a restrictive sequence, which is interesting because they're using 72 letters, but in reality, we only have 4. I'm just geeking out about this.
Yeah. Well, either SFF shows, so
yes, we're allowed to get really nerdy about DNA.
Yeah, it's interesting when like, what could you do? I mean, although what life forms would there be? I mean, if we've got 4, I mean 72. I mean, what would life be like if you couldn't encode that much information? You'd be, well, you can't, you couldn't imagine it.
Mm-hmm. This is another story that kind of takes a religious element, I think.
Yeah.
I think the golem and the 72 letters that are used to animate them is Jewish. If somebody wants to correct me on that. But there is an actual, I think, a Jewish rabbi in the story who tells him that they kind of meditate upon the 72 letters. It's considered to be like a mystical experience in a way. And that then science or scientific endeavors have taken it because it is a literal thing that actually works, and they're using it for a different purpose, which is kind of bringing religion and science into conflict in some way.
Yeah.
And then, when you ask, like, if you can create something that has the means of recreating, of reproducing,
Yeah. That's,
literally, that's a huge question. Have you become God?
yeah. Or in the case of this, it's like a God committee. The whole team.
Yeah.
Which is the committee of God.
Yes. Have we been designed by a committee? Terrifying, actually.
I don't know. At least it means things are done a bit more evenly than one person. But that's the theology discussion there. I believe.
I mean, their committee has all the things you don't want on a committee. People who disagree, but also the guy who is totally into eugenics.
Yeah.
Everybody has a different agenda.
That's pretty much it, isn't it?
Yeah, we've covered all of them. So any final thoughts, any commentary from the chat we should address?
Somebody's saying my name in chat.
Somebody wants your attention.
Some vague reason that name's over familiar, although it's not.
Okay.
Okay, my videos make them laugh. I'm glad. Well, as long as it's not the one that I meant to be serious. Anyway, so the next live show, when that be? Well, we don't know yet, do we?
Yeah. We have no definite plans for the next live show because, as we mentioned at the beginning of this one, life has been a bit crazy.
Yeah.
And we haven't been reading short fiction as regularly because of desire and other pressures. So we will announce the next live show probably on Twitter whenever we figure that out. It probably won't be in the next 4 weeks.
It might end up being a what we did before, when we did sort of 2 extended ones, so it'll be closer to November almost.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of November and the holiday season and such, as we're in the second part of the year, or getting towards the end of the year. So I think it might be a good idea to ask people if they want us to do kind of a wrap up of the year type of live show. Because not everybody has watched all the previous live shows and knows all of our favorites. So if anybody's interested in us doing a overview of what we thought were the best stories, perhaps in different categories, like short story, novelette, novella, and stuff, if that would be helpful to people, let us know, because I am always preparing for Hugo nominations. So I like to know what's going to be in each category. So we'll probably do at least one more before the end of the year.
Yep. And then we'll see how it goes for next year. Although, we'll talk about it in the future.
Yeah. So maybe to wrap up, we should talk about what we're going to read in the future or anything on our own.
For me, I'm just reading the same things as always. I mean, Clarksville, Uncanny, Lightspeed, Tour.com.
Mm-hmm.
But I've got a particular focus so at the moment with reading certain books so in the next 2 weeks because I'm going to be meeting an awful lot of authors in the next 2 weeks, like 40 of them. So
Yes.
um,
Are you going to a festival or something, or a convention?
yeah, a week from now I'll be in London, so
Uh,
there'll
have
be like
fun.
35 authors there. That'd be interesting. I've never met an author before, so and I've met 35
Play it
in one go.
Just play it cool. So for me, I have very little idea what I'm going to be reading. I'm kind of just picking up what sounds good right now. I will be reading the Women of Futures Past anthology that just came out. It's reprinted classic stories by female authors in science fiction. I'm really looking forward to that. And I'll be reading Uncanny. That I know for sure.
Buddy read, we haven't talked about what if we're gonna buddy read anything because we've got a
Yeah.
few ideas. We've got the engineering infinity, them ones, with Jonathan Stein, possibly, and there's something else by the way that I bought a couple of weeks ago that I haven't shown. So I'll tell you what that is and see. I think it might interest you actually.
Okay, yeah, we'll decide something about future buddy reads. So
Yep. And we'll announce that kind of thing on Twitter.
Yeah.
On Twitter.
Yep. So I think that about wraps up this live show. Apologies if it was not very well prepared. But I really enjoyed talking about these stories. I really enjoyed rereading
Yep.
this collection. So
That's it then.
yeah, we're gonna say goodbye now. Just
Yeah,
very
so
awkwardly.
thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time, whenever that is.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.